In a quiet remote town of Moorcroft, Wyoming, a scruffy dog named Paul was at the front door of this old and rather quaint house, clawing madly to get out. A young girl about 8 years hears the scratching and comes to the door. She opens the door, and Paul rushed out into the yard wagging his tail. As he ran across the grassy yard, he sees something. Paul's ears stood up straight at a very strange, low humming noise from above. He looks up and a soft orange light reflects in his wide eyes. Whimpering nervously, he looks at something intently. Closer to Paul comes the little girl, her mouth slightly open, showing awe and confusion. Fast forward to the present, two British science fiction nerds, Graham Willie and Clive Goling, are about to embark on an epic road trip across the United States, starting with the mother of all conventions, San Diego Comic-Con. The place was filled with body-painted, costumed, die-hard fans in huge numbers. Graham and Clive seem overwhelmingly excited to join hundreds of people lining up just to meet a famous actor. After a very long day full of fun at Comic-Con, Graham and Clive reaches back to their hotel room, having loaded their arms with bags full of sci-fi stuff, and can hardly believe that they are finally enjoying an American dream trip. But their adventures aren't going to stop at Comic-Con. They have another big plan: to visit famous places where people say they've seen UFOs. Their plan includes stops in Nevada at Area 51 and the Black Mailbox, Camp Verde in Arizona, Apache Junction, and finally Roswell, New Mexico, where the famous UFO crash allegedly happened in 1947. Next morning, Graham and Clive are standing excitedly outside their hotel, awaiting their transport. A shiny, large RV pulled in and they run towards it eager to start their dream trip. They pack up fast and set off, very excited. In Arizona, they stop at a crazy bar filled with pictures and sculptures of UFOs and aliens. To add to their enjoyment, the bartender is friendly and matches their vibe. Clive leaves to go to the restroom, leaving Graham all alone at the bar soaking in the atmosphere, when suddenly two rough-looking men walk in, making Graham feel uneasy. Clive returns, babbling excitedly about a toilet dispenser in the shape of an alien's head he had spotted in the restroom. The two men begin to mock Clive and Graham as weirdos, strongly implying that they are homosexuals. The atmosphere grew tense, and realizing the danger of a potential fight, Clive and Graham quickly left the bar. In the rush, Clive accidentally backed the RV into the men's truck and left a big dent. The two friends drive off as fast as their heart could race at that moment, knowing this was far from an end. At a famous UFO spot in Nevada called the Black Mailbox, Graham takes pictures, having a great time. But when he sees in the distance a car approaching, they freak out, thinking it's the two menacing men from the bar. They run to get back into their RV with racing hearts. As the car passes their RV at high speed, it suddenly overturns. The car flips over and over, hitting the ground hard and sliding onto its top with smoke coming out. Graham and Clive, still confused and shocked, approach with caution to the wrecked vehicle, but to their surprise, find it empty. Clive reaches his phone to call for help, but before he can dial, they hear a voice from behind. Confused, they turn around to see a strange figure stepping into the light. Standing in front of them, wearing only cut-off shorts and flip-flops, is an alien. The alien calmly tells them to put the phone down. Clive faints on the very spot, urinating in his pants in the process. Graham, on the other hand, is hysterical, but the alien, whose name is Paul, tries to calm them down. He even introduces himself and reassures them that he has no intention to harm them and that he just needs their help. They dragged the unconscious Clive inside the RV and took off into the darkness. As they drove away, Graham asks Paul where to go. Paul simply replies to head north. Back at the crash site, a shady government agent named Zoyle arrives. He examines the scene and finds the wet patch left by Clive. He disgustedly spits out a taste of it after licking it, and upon reaching a clue, radios a mysterious female superior with the news that he is closing in on Paul. She instructs him to take down Paul quickly and treat him as needed. A couple of hours later, Clive wakes up, still shocked and confused. He sees Paul eating pistachios and panicking. He grabs the alien by the neck, babbling something in comic book language. Graham hastily intervenes to clarify who Paul is and what had happened. Paul took this opportunity to tell them he was from a small planet in the northern spiral arm of the Andromeda Galaxy. They get to travel those very long distances using wormholes. Still angry, Clive reaches out to slap Paul across the face to see if he is real. But their argument is cut short as they notice a roadblock up ahead. Graham slows down. Then, in the flash of an eye, Paul disappears into thin air. Graham and Clive step out of the RV, facing two government agents, Haggard and O'Reilly. O'Reilly searches the RV, finding nothing suspicious except for some wet jeans. The agents, having no reason to detain them, lets them go. Just as Graham and Clive get into the RV to drive off at high speed, Paul amazingly reappears in front of them without any clothes and shows off his thing. The agents turn around just in time to see the RV cross the road, then straighten out to continue on its way. On the following day, Agent Zoyle meets with the agents to get to the bottom of the report, since both of them had felt suspicion about the RV. In great annoyance, Zoyle orders them to continue tracking the RV and the two British tourists. Meanwhile, Graham and Clive pull out of a gas station and purchase food. Trying to look casual, they enter the store, but their hearts skipped a beat when a police officer pulled up outside. They rushed out of the store immediately, trying not to attract any attention, back into the RV and headed off into the desert. Suddenly something struck the windshield, making everybody jump. Graham slowed the RV to a stop. A black bird lay across the road dead from the impact. Paul picks up the bird, and to the amazement of Graham and Clive, he brings it back to life. As they are all surprised by the miracle, Paul stuffs the bird into his mouth with a loud crunch. In his amazement, Graham asks Paul if he could bring a human back to life. Paul explains that it would be very dangerous and could backfire, possibly killing him instead. Zoyle and his three men interrogate the police officer and cashier. Annoyed, he reports it immediately to his boss, who replies to stop the nonsense, instructing Zoyle that he should recover that alien no matter what happens. The sun sets, and the RV arrives at a motor park to stay overnight. They are met by the owner of the park, Ruth, who has one lens in her glasses blacked out. She requests their passports in order to identify them, and Clive collects them for her. Ruth opens the gate after checking them in to allow them to drive through. Graham realizes that he is having a crush on Ruth after gazing at her on the way back. She heads back to her RV, only to be yelled at by her abusive, controlling father, Moses. That night, Clive, Graham, and Paul enjoy a barbecue together. Paul explains that he has been on Earth for 60 years. He landed by accident during a science mission, but the ship broke down and crashed in a field in Wyoming. A little girl called Tara helped him out of the wreck before a group of army guys took him away. Ever since, Paul has been advising the government in different scientific and sociological projects. He even advised Steven Spielberg for his film E.T. and helped create the character Fox Mulder from The X-Files. Meanwhile, Ruth notices three shadows behind the RV. Before she can check on them, Moses orders her back inside. Next morning, Ruth decides to check on the RV with the mysterious person from the night before. When she sees Paul, she screams and faints. Everyone worries that Ruth might reveal Paul's identity when she wakes up, so they take her along and plan to explain everything later. First, they needed to get their passports back. Hearing this, Paul disappears. In Moses' RV, the door swings open by itself. Paul reappears in the kitchen, looking for Clive's passport. Moses walks in and is shocked to see Paul. He runs out of the RV, with Moses chasing him and loading a shotgun. Paul catches up with Graham as their RV speeds away. Ruth wakes up in the RV, terrified and thinking Paul is a demon. She starts praying loudly. Annoyed by her shouting, Paul touches her forehead, instantly sharing all the knowledge about his planet and the origins of life in the universe with her. Meanwhile, Zoyle and his men interrogate Moses, who insists that Ruth was taken by a demon. Zoyle and his agents leave, but Moses decides to find Ruth and deal with the demons himself. Back in the RV, Paul heals Ruth's injured eye. Amazed by the miracle, Ruth begins to trust Paul and the others. That night, the group stops at a busy bar. Ruth sneaks to a payphone to call her father, but Agent Zoyle answers instead. He warns her that she's in danger and urges her and her friends to turn themselves in. Ruth, unaware that Haggard and O'Reilly are listening in, panics and hangs up. Realizing her mistake, she rushes back to the bar, and the group quickly leaves in the RV. Later that night, the group gathers around a campfire. Paul recounts the night he crash-landed on Earth 60 years ago. He killed Tara's dog by accident, and Paul was the very first English word he knew. Although feeling terrible for Tara, Paul never had a chance to say sorry. The reason Paul gets chased by the government is they need his brain for obtaining some multipotent stem cells for further secret projects. With help from a friend inside Area 51, Paul sent an SOS to his home planet, and now his people are on their way to rescue him. The next morning, Graham and Clive stroll down the busy main street with Paul, who is disguised in a little cowboy outfit from a shop. They needed to buy fireworks for Paul's escape plan. Meanwhile, Agent Zoyle and his men are tracking down Paul and his friends. Moses is also on the road, trying to save his daughter, Ruth. Eventually, Paul and the gang arrive at Tara's farmhouse to apologize for accidentally killing her dog back in 1947. Tara is relieved to finally see Paul, confirming that she wasn't crazy all these years. She starts to make tea, but before she can finish, Haggard and O'Reilly show up on one side of the house, and Zoyle appears on the other. The agents throw harmful gas into the house, and Paul becomes unconscious. The group quickly escapes with Paul in their RV, but O'Reilly fires his gun, hitting the gas stove and causing the house to explode. As they race away, Haggard accidentally drives off a cliff and dies, leaving Zoyle to continue the chase. Zoyle promises his boss he'll capture Paul soon, but she's out of patience and orders a military response. Frustrated, Zoyle destroys his radio. When Paul, Graham, Clive, Ruth, and Tara arrive at their rendezvous point, they set off fireworks as a signal. Suddenly, strange orange lights appear above the trees. They hope it's Paul's spaceship, but it turns out to be an army helicopter with the mysterious big guy, Zoyle's boss, on board. She and her soldiers prepare to shoot Paul, but Zoyle reveals he's been helping Paul all along, and he was the inside contact he had, who helped him send the SOS message. He tries to stop the soldiers, but gets shot in the shoulder by the big guy. The big guy orders Paul to get in the helicopter, but Graham and Clive step up to protect him. They strike heroic comic book poses and try to fight back, and Tara ends up punching out the big guy. Just then, Moses arrives with a shotgun and tries to shoot Paul, but accidentally hits Graham instead. Paul decides to heal Graham, even though it takes a lot out of him. After healing Graham, Paul collapses from exhaustion. The group gathers around Paul's still body, worried he might not wake up. After a tense moment, Paul revives himself. Graham and Ruth share a happy kiss, relieved he's alive. Suddenly, the big guy wakes up and tries to shoot them, but Paul's spaceship arrives just in time, killing her instantly. As Paul prepares to leave, he invites Tara to come with him to live a better life on his planet. Tara accepts and boards the spaceship. Paul says a heartfelt goodbye to his friends before vanishing into the galaxy. 2 years later, Graham, Clive, and Ruth are at a comic convention, promoting their hugely successful comic book, Paul.